everyone, my name is Abhishek Jain, and through this video I'm just going to explain how to create a Docker image for a Django based application with all the required setup needed to build or develop a Django application. And the prerequisite to continue with this video is the basic knowledge of a Docker along with the frequently used command of a Django web framework. So let's get into the demo part and try to understand how we can create a Docker image first, and then how we can run the containerized application to set up the entire Django web framework. So the very first thing is, whenever we want to create an image, we have to create a Docker file. And to create a Docker file, we have to just have a, let me just bring in my notepad++. So we have to create a Docker file. So I have created a Docker Django tutorial. Here you can have to Docker file without any extension. So I'm just gonna use all type. Okay. So the very first thing, whenever we create a Docker Docker file, I just copy paste the complete content which we will be needing, and I'm just gonna explain the way it is designed. So the very first step which we need is a so we know that the Django is a Python based module. So from this is gonna be my Python 3 is gonna be my base image, and after that I'm just setting up Python unbuffered equal to 1. That is completely specific to the Python to ensure that nothing is going to be buffered, everything is going to be thrown out on a standard output. You can just read the documentation for more detail on that. Then what we are doing is I'm just creating a code. So what Dockerfile does is whatever the instructions we have, that goes to the Docker daemon and it executes one by one, right? And for more detail you can just go through my Docker tutorial on YouTube, or you can just watch any others, the Docker tutorial to understand how the Docker file actually works. So the next command what we are doing is we are creating a folder which is code. So basically the base image gets created, and on top of it, the code folder is going to be created. Then work directory means it's similar, like we are just getting into that directory which we had created in the last instruction. Then we are just copying this requirement.txt. So requirement.txt also we are going to create here. So we know that for installing a Python module, we need a requirement.txt, which actually help us to just consolidate all the modules in a file, and we can just pass that to the pip, and that pip will read all those modules and start installing them. Right. The next thing is run pip install. So what we are doing is now we are utilizing this requirement.txt file to just install all the modules, and then what we are doing is we are just copying the complete stuff, whatever is gonna be installed. We are just putting that into the code directory which we had created over here. And requirement.txt is also we are just copying into the code file. So the next thing which we are going to create is the requirement.txt file. Okay. So requirement.txt file, and that is also in a same folder. And to just expedite the process, you can just choose whatever the Docker, I think I do have a requirement.txt file. I have already created that. So let me just copy this and just paste it here to replace this. Okay. And I just open this. Okay. And let me just open this, and you can just give the version, whatever the version you want to use here, right? So I'm just keeping as is, whatever I have. And then we are good, right? So the next thing which we have to do is we have to just go into the command prompt for this particular folder. I'm just coming here. Now, the next thing which I have to do is, if I run, if I just build the image with this, what's going to happen is that folder structure is going to be created. But if you are aware of a Django, then what we have to do is the very first thing which we have to do is we have to run a start project command, right? So now what we're gonna do is the next thing we are going to create a Docker compose file. So what is Docker compose file? Docker compose file is where we can just define a multiple containers, and those containers are actually known as different services, right? To again expedite the process, I have already created a the sample Docker image, right? So I'll just explain you that Docker image also. Okay. So now we have two services, DB and web. And DB, you will see I'm just setting up the Postgres, right? So I'm just defining a DB and all those stuff. Now we have a volume. We are just having to persist the data which we are going to create. And now we have a web. In web, what we are doing, just see this. We are just using the Python manage py run server, right? So, but before running this, since what's happened, build means, you know, it is going to build it is going to build means it is going to create the image, and how the image is going to be created, it is going to read the Docker file, right? So now I have to save this as a Docker compose YAML. Docker compose YAML. So I mean, why I'm just using only YAML, nothing else. These kind of things is very specific to the Docker. That's the reason I mentioned in the beginning that person should be understanding the basic of a Docker, right? So now we are just good to run one command, and that is actually very specific to Django, and we have to run this command which I have already created, so that we can just save some time and invest that time to just understand. So what we are doing, we are running the Docker compose, and we are just running the specific service which is known as web. So we are just going to run that web. So what's going to happen is, what Docker daemon going to do is, it's pick this web, whatever the instructions we have given, based on that it is going to create the first thing. It will check for the image. If it is not there, then it's going to build that, right? So let me just run this. Okay, so it looks like, you know, in line number 6, column 1, so there is some problem. Okay, so on line number 6, so basically that's the problem here. I think there should be another problem here. So we cannot use tab since it's a YAML. It's a YAML, right? So if it is a YAML, then we have to be very careful not to use a tab, rather than we have to use a space bar. Okay, now this time it looks good. So what this command is actually doing, so if you are aware of a Django, then the very first command we run after installing a Django admin, then start project, then Django with Docker. So what this command does, it's actually create the project structure for us inside the folder named Django with Docker. Right, so let's go to the folder structure and see whether that folder has been created. Not yet. So first it will just pick this service, then it's gonna build. At this point of time, it is going to switch to this Dockerfile. This complete code will go to the Docker daemon, and this image is gonna create it. And if you will see the output over here, you can see that the build process is just going forward. So very first thing is, it's just create the Python 3 image. Top of it, it just set the environmental variable, then it's created a code folder, make it as a work directory, then copy the requirement.txt, and this copy requirement.txt will be happening from your host machine. It is going to be stored in our code. Then it is going to install, you know, the module which are required and going to be appended to the image we have, right? And now it's trying to just install, you know, the Django. So it means that we are now reached to this particular point where it is trying to just install the module which we have in our requirement text. Okay, so it means this looks good. So let me just go to the folder. Yep, so we can see this folder has been created. So if you are aware of, you know, the Django setup information, so now you can see this folder has been created. Now the next thing is very simple. We have to, so there are two things, right? The very first thing which we have to do is, so there are multiple you know, steps involved in it. So if you are aware of that, so right, by default Django uses, you know, the SQLite database. But if you want to use a Postgres, because I'm just going to use a Postgres, because if you will see my Docker compose, I just created this Postgres. But if you want to run with the default, you do have to just remove this part, right? But it's not recommended to use that SQLite in the production environment. So definitely you will be using some relational database. So I'm just using a Postgres over here, right? So the next command which you have to run is, we have to just, first we have to modify this, right? And to modify this, and we know that if you are aware of Django, in settings.py we have a database section, right? So I'll just go to that database section, and whatever the default we have here, you have to replace with this one, and just save it. So I have to just remove this. We should be good. And if I just run, now we are good, and we have to just run the docker compose up command. That's it. And now we are good to just use So that is how you can just, you know, run your Docker, you know, the application through the Docker containers, right? So this is just a basic which I wanted to cover in this. In the next section, we are just going to play with some more frequently used command of the Django application. We will run that application and we will see whether it's working fine or not. Because in Docker Compose, one more thing which I can just quickly explain you. So there is a port